Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My names are Bamidele Salam. I represent the fantastic people of Ede North, Ede South, Egbedore, Ejibo Federal Constituency of Osun State. And I'm glad to also be a part of this wonderful night assembly. Mr. Speaker, let me also start on a note
Honorable Serki Adar, Honorable Yusuf.
Let me also start on the note of
Honorable Banarabi. Resume your seat.
Noting with joy the fact that the executive accepted the positive challenge of the legislature in working towards reverting to the normal budget cycle of January to December of every year. So I thank the President and the member of the Federal Executive Council for taking that challenge and coming up with the presentation of the budget, which the President did lay before us yesterday. Honorable Speaker, I want to make a few observations about the speech, which was the document through which the President presented the draft estimates before this August gathering yesterday. I start off, Mr. Speaker, by noting the comment of Mr. President on paragraph 8 of his speech, where he reflected on the growth in the GDP that Nigeria has recorded in the years 2017, 2018, and the current year 2019. I want to say that it is gladdening when we read out statistics and the statistics point upward on any indices of development. But then there is something more fundamental and more important, Mr. Speaker, that I think we should pay our attention to. And that is in asking ourselves the critical question of how far the upward movement of our statistics have reflected in the living condition of the average man and average woman in Nigeria. In other words, how inclusive has been our growth in the last 10, 15 years? What are the indications of improvement that we can see in the living standard of the man in Aba, the man in Funtua, the woman in Zamfara, and of course that young man in Abeokuta who is looking on to the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to put in programs and policies that will make him able to fulfill his obligation as a citizen and live a meaningful life. And so on this note, I want to charge the new economic management team which Mr. President has put in place to please ensure that we have an inclusive growth policy so that we do not only rely on improvement in statistics to decide on whether we are doing well or not, but of course look at the practical demonstration of the growth in the living standard of the members of the public. For example, again, Mr. Speaker, one of our colleagues who spoke earlier made mention of the issue that has to do with the social investment program of the federal government. I commend the federal government for initiating the social investment program in the first instance, but I also want to note that it is saddening that as critical as this component of the budget is to the living standard of Nigerians, we have had a drastic reduction in the quantum of funds allocated to the social investment program in the 2020 budget that the President has laid before us. What we are going
Honorable, your time is off.
On the social investment program in the upcoming year, for your information, Mr. Speaker, is 30 billion naira. And I did a quick calculation. If the target of the social investment program is just 10 million Nigerians, with 30 billion naira, 10 million Nigerians will be going home with 3,000 naira per person for the whole year. Mr. Speaker, this is about 8 naira per day investment on the poor, the weak, and the socially disadvantaged of our population. I want to urge that when the time comes for the consideration of this budget, Mr. Speaker, this House should look at the possibility of increasing the allocation to the social investment program from 30 billion naira to at least 100 billion naira for 2020 appropriation. In the same way, Mr. Speaker, I note also the commitment that the President gave in paragraph 43 of his speech, where he gave a commitment to the effect that going forward, the completion of ongoing projects will be prioritized over the introduction of new ones. By the grace of God and the goodwill of Mr. Speaker, I was a member of a committee that is investigating the cases of abandoned projects in Nigeria from 1999 till date. And I must say that I've not come into contact, I've not had information that is more depressing than what I've had serving on that committee. There are projects conceived, initiated, and approved as far back as 2001, the completion period of which was 27 weeks, which as we speak are at completion stages of between 15 and 30%. We have projects in several ministry departments and agencies conceived 10, 15 years ago, which had not even taken off. And when we probe further into the reasons why these projects have not been completed, in most cases, Mr. Speaker, it is because there are no budgetary allocations to these projects. And of course, we know when projects take a long time to be completed, inflation sets in. And a project that was meant to be completed at a sum of, for example, 100 million naira in 2004, today may cost up to 250 million naira to complete. So the country loses, and the community that are supposed to benefit from the project also lose. Mr. Speaker, I commend the President and the Federal Executive Council for giving this commitment that henceforth new projects will not be introduced where there are ongoing projects that have not been completed. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, it is one thing to make a commitment. It is another thing to see that the commitment that we make are seen through fiscal discipline. I want to urge that the Federal Executive Council should follow through this promise, this commitment that has been made to ensure that the projects which Nigeria has sunk billions and trillions of naira into, some as far back as 15, 16, 20 years ago, are completed for the benefit of the Nigerian people. And also, Mr. Speaker, I want to also note with joy, oh yes, relative joy, that we have been able to build our foreign reserve up to 42.5 billion US dollars. As impressive as these figures appear, they are also a far cry from what countries that do not have the size of Nigeria in terms of population, that do not have the resources Nigeria has, have been able to build their foreign reserves, especially in the last 10, 15 years. A country which consumes all it makes, especially on luxury, and refuses to put a chunk of its resources into reserve, is likely to go bankrupt when there is a little dislocation in the global economic system. And of course, we all know what's happening today in the world. You cannot predict what happens next, especially a country where the major earning power that we have is in the depleted resources of oil. And we know the volatility in this sector and in this industry. So as commendable as the growth in the foreign reserve is, I want to encourage the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to have a definite commitment to raising our foreign reserve in the next 3-4 years to at least $100 billion US. And Mr. Speaker, I think it is very possible. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I also want to ask that when we do plan our budget and our expenditure, we should have specific target on job creation. We should put figures to the number of jobs that we hope to create in a particular fiscal year. I cannot see that in this document. I don't know whether it's in the details of the budget, but I want to encourage that when next we do our planning on fiscal policies, on budgetary allocations, we should have figures put to the jobs that we hope to create. The youth of Nigeria are looking forward to getting jobs, and day in, day out, we are being faced with insecurity that is being backed with unemployment. With these remarks, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Speaker, I also want to support that we go ahead with the second reading of the appropriation bill, and I want to pray that we will be able to meet up to the target of passing this bill before the end of the year, so that we can revert to the January to December cycle of budgetary implementation. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mr. Speaker.